Welcome to Country Fried Rock, where we have conversations with songwriters for real music lovers who enjoy context and musical connection. We are Country Fried Rock. Country Fried Rock is sponsored in part by Bonnaroo. Get your tickets now on countryfriedrock.org. Head to countryfriedrock.org/Bonnaroo and enter a sweepstakes to win passes for two for all 4 days of Bonnaroo, including camping. Enter now at countryfriedrock.org/Bonnaroo. No purchase necessary. See website for details. I'm Sloan Spencer. This week on Country Fried Rock, I talk with Reed Turchi, a guy from North Carolina who's long been obsessed with North Mississippi hill country blues, studying the traditional guys and making it his own. His band, Turchi, has a strict no rehearsal policy and lives across the country. They bring it all together with an epic 4.5-hour performance to kick off every tour. Somehow, it all comes together. Turchi has a brand new record. We'll find out more about how they work, this long-distance band, this week on Country Fried Rock. My guest today on Country Fried Rock is Reed Turchi of a band I have just found, although they're not new, called Turchi. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So I feel a little bit late to the party because, first of all, you're geographically not terribly far from me in the Carolinas, but somehow I missed it. And turns out there's lots of overlap with folks that I know, so I don't know what planet I've been on. What's been going on for Turchi?
Well, I don't know exactly what planet we've been on, which might explain part of it, but we're a bit of a geographical oddity. All three of the full-time members, me and drummer Cam Weeks and the bass player Andrew Hamlet, all live pretty far apart. We met in Chapel Hill, but Andrew lived down outside of Atlanta, Georgia, and Cam lives out in Wilmington. And so, for the most part, we have a very strict no rehearsal rule, which has served us well. And we only get together for sort of stretches of shows, and this just continues to add to the oddity. Otherwise, I'm on the road more often than not doing a lot of sort of little solo one-offs here and there. So our hometown aspect is not really our strong suit, nor will it ever be. So, for the most part, we meet up somewhere, and then the tour usually starts in someone's city and then ends in someone else's city. Yeah, so we do like full laps. Usually Wilmington's easy because it's nice to have, as it's warm, it's nice to have an extra day off there at the end.
Right.
So we'll start there. There's a bar there called Loggerheads, which is this really kind of small, grimy beach bar, and they'll let us play whenever we want, and we usually knock out a nice, 4.5-hour set as kind of the first thing of the stretch that shakes everybody loose for a while.
Nice.
Yeah, so we take it from there. It's real low-key. And anything we haven't already gotten together on in terms of new songs. Because, we use technology to stay in touch and share ideas, but then usually sort of iron some things out there.
Well, so then how did y'all get together originally?
We all met, like I said, in Chapel Hill, where Cam went to school. Cam's older than Andrew and I. I won't disclose how much for his own personal interest, but he was actually bartending. He's played in a ton of different Triangle area bands, most recently before me with Aminal, which then turned into Some Army. And so he was always the drummer for Aminal, and then was for Some Army for a while until he moved to Wilmington. And then before that, he was with Black Skies. And yeah, so he's been around for a while. And then Andrew and I were in school at the same time. And Andrew is involved with a bunch of different musical projects, or has been, and we worked together a lot while we were both in school, but we're never actually in the same band. And the closest we ever got was we DJ'd together for a year at frat parties and stuff, till one incident which will go unmentioned. And then there was no more DJing. And then the music that he was working on was more sort of electronic, ambient in ways, which I was interested in, but it wasn't my thing, and he was kind of amused by what I was up to. But it wasn't until actually the November after I graduated, and he had graduated, half a year before me, or a little more than that. But it wasn't until later that I sort of gave him a call and was like, well, because the bass player we had to get out. Her name was Sarah Slaughter, and she was great, but she wanted to not settle down, but get a job. She had to do that, and so then I gave Andrew a call, and he was amused by the idea, and so he flew out. I was out west in Phoenix at that point. This was in November of 2012. He flew out there. We worked on the songs for a day, and then went on a tour. Kind of always how it's been, but it's been a fun ride.
You have an upcoming record called Can't Bury Your Past. How did that come together?
the recording for that actually started, the earliest recordings that are on that were in December of 2012. And we had been, Andrew and Cam and I did about, he flew out to Arizona, and then we all met up in Wichita, which is where the first gig was, which was a long drive. And then we worked our way back east for about 2.5 weeks, and then scheduled some studio time at Ardent in Memphis, where I'm the label director there. And so I spent part of my time in Memphis too. But anyway, we had this studio time booked, and touring had gone well with that lineup, with Andrew as the new bass player. So Cam and I sort of insisted that he, and I guess he was game too, insisted that he be a part of the recording. And so we got together in December for a week at Ardent and tracked a lot of things, a lot of which we ended up not being fully happy with. So I don't know, all these things are sort of overlapping, so we can spread out to them as we want to. But as part of that tour right before then, we played in Lafayette, Louisiana with our friend John Troutman, a great pedal steel player who plays in Little Band of Gold and used to play in the Mendoza line, and then a harmonica player who happened to open for us that night, Brian Martin, and we invited him to sit in. So we played this live set. It was a good show. And then when we got to Memphis for this mixing and tracking session, Andrew drove from Atlanta, but Cam had to drive from Wilmington, which is a long drive. So he was like a whole day late. And so we just took that day, I think it was Monday, we took that whole day, and just since we didn't have anything else to do, we mixed that show from Lafayette because we had a good board that night and someone was able to really multi-track, not just a board mix. And we just wanted to hear what it sounded like. So Adam Hill, the engineer, was game. We spent the day mixing that, and Cam shows up at like 11 or midnight that night, a full day late, but that's okay because now we've just mixed what turns out to be our record that came out last March, the Live in Lafayette.
Okay.
And
check out our live music partners at linguamusicalive.com. Live events that you can attend near Asheville, North Carolina, as well as their online video series, Lingua Musica Live. Country Fried Rock is committed to supporting the musicians, making the music we love. Help them out by buying their music, and help us out at no extra cost by purchasing through the links on our website.
Hey, this is Reed from Turchi on Country Fried Rock. So this is all the kind of going on the fly. So we're pretty pleased with ourselves because we hadn't decided to release that yet, but we had spent the day mixing it, and it sounded better than we had remembered it. So then we have the next 4 days to record, and I don't know if it was the first time the three of us had been together in a studio, especially in a sort of more historic and large studio.
Sure.
It's a great place, but it can be, it's not like sort of the cramped basement confines that you imagine for kind of a rough and tumble sound. So I think we were a little stiff, and so a lot of the songs came out a little lifeless, which I think is always a risk of the studio, especially with a band that really only plays live and doesn't rehearse. The material that we all agreed was really good from that session were actually these 4 or 5 quieter songs that I had written while I was just driving around solo. And they were really solo songs, less so than band songs. But one of the mornings that we were recording, we all kind of messed around on them. And then going back and listening, we all really liked those. They were the most casual performances. They felt a little more natural. They didn't feel like anyone was trying too hard. So that's what wound up on the EP that came out late last year.
Okay.
As kind of its own, because the songs really don't work with the louder stuff, but they're nice. And I think that kind of flew under a lot of people's radar because EPs are not very popular. But those songs definitely live together nicely. So back to what you actually asked about, I guess 3 of the songs from that first Ardent session in December that were louder songs, and the last 3 songs on this record, those were all good enough, and we came back to them later. And so we kind of held those in the bag, and then this past summer in July, we had 2 weeks of, or 2.5 week tour together, kind of through the Southeast, and we all remembered sort of the downfall of the sort of stiff Ardent experience, and so we decided that we had sort of a half day off in the middle of that tour in July, and we figured we'd go, and it was in Nashville, which we all kind of joked about, none of us being big fans of Nashville's larger industry. So we decided we'd just book the cheapest, smallest room we could find and just spend the half day messing around, no overdubs, no no real like instrumentation or any of that, just sort of playing through, no vocals even beyond just sort of scratch placeholders. And so we went in there for the day and banged out all the other tracks that are on the new album, the fundamental tracks, the guitar and bass and drums. Then from there, that was July, and then we had some overdubs back in Memphis with the horn player and the keyboard player, and then finally mixed it, I guess, November and December of 2013, and then it was done.
When you went back to Memphis with the instrumental and that you were working on the overdubs and stuff, and you brought in some folks for horns and keys, you called upon some pretty nice players, I must say.
Yeah, no, that's my favorite part of the record. I mean, you just listen to those guys.
How did those relationships come about?
Both those guys are in the band J.J. Gray and Mofro.
Mm-hmm.
Anthony, the keyboard player, is also in a band called Greyhounds. He and the guitar player from Mofro, Andrew Trube, who didn't play on the record but is in the same sort of friend group and could have easily played on the record. And I had been working with those guys a lot because wearing my other hat as Ardent Music label director, I spent about the same year and a half period pushing to sign Greyhounds to the Ardent Music label, which has happened now, and their record comes out early next month, about 2.5 weeks before my record does, and those guys are fantastic. That record is, blowing up. It's getting a lot of press, and that's all fantastic. But they were just sort of friendships that came through working with those guys, talking to those guys, meeting up when Mofro was on the road to kind of hang out, but also make sure this sort of signing deal happened because I really wanted to work with them. And then Art, I just kind of offhandedly asked Art, and he lives in Memphis, so that was easy. And he was down. Art's an amazing saxophone player. He plays with the Bow Keys also in Memphis.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Yeah, he's also been playing a bunch of gigs with Greg Allman lately.
Nice.
Yeah, he's really, I think more and more people are starting to find him, which is fantastic because he deserves it. So he was also old friends with Adam Hill, the engineer. So he just wanted to come in and hang out for the night. And we just sat there with the 12-pack and, we had the tracks and he just made up whatever he wanted and we kind of talked about it and basically had a fun time that resulted in those amazing horn parts on 4 or 5 songs.
Cool.
And then Anthony, I grew up playing piano and I really I've never gotten to have piano on a record. And Anthony's a tremendous organ, keyboard, and then the left hand bass player. So I asked him if he wanted to check any of it out, and he did. And then, the keyboard and organ is great, and he added not just sort of another texture, but in some cases sort of whole new progressions to the songs. And he contributed via the internet, but those two players made a huge impact. They're great guys.
I am a huge fan of side projects and that what I call the family tree of various bands like that. So I don't normally digress into people's day jobs, but what is a music label director?
I ran this little blues label called Devil Down while I was in college, which focused on North Mississippi blues. And then thanks to Mary Lindsay Dickinson, the widow of Jim Dickinson and the mother of the North Mississippi All-Stars, she introduced me to John Fry, the owner and founder of Ardent and the whole Ardent world. And then the day after I graduated from Chapel Hill, they hired me to revive their label, Ardent Music, which had been sort of dormant for a while.
Wow.
And so then I went from wearing 2 hats to wearing, a half dozen now. So it just means that basically it's sort of, it breaks down to a sort of slightly more powerful A&R guy in that I'm the only person at Ardent directly that's only dedicated to the label. There's no one else. There are other people who do sort of elements of it, the world gets smaller. Another guy from Chapel Hill, Wesley Graham, I got hired there, and so now he does all the branding and social media for Ardent. So he's great to have on that team. But basically, it's my job to try to make sure the label comes back to life and does so strong.
Country Fried Rock is committed to helping prevent musician suicide. For the last 2 years, our official charity has been Nucci's Space, a nonprofit organization removing barriers to mental health care for the music community of Athens, Georgia. This model program addresses everything from the need for affordable rehearsal space to loaner gear, as well as direct mental health services and primary care for musicians. We've got a ton of ways you can help them out at countryfriedrock.bandcamp.com. 2 incredible album compilations, baby onesies, check it all out. Get Create some great music for yourself or for a friend and make a difference. Find us on iTunes, Spreaker, Podfeed, Player FM, Blueberry, Stitcher, Gigadial, Digital Podcast, and some great apps including Agogo and Swell in both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. Wherever you listen, you'll find Country Fried Rock. Never miss an episode.
Check us out online at www.theturchi.com.
When I grow up, I want to do that. That's neat.
Yeah, it's been neat, and it's a long history of relationships off and on between the label, Ardent Music, the studio. They're all in the same building, and then the once very popular but now more quiet Christian label, Ardent Records, which had like Skillet and Todd Agnew. So in sort of every different era, there's been some aspect of the labels has really been sort of the main thing in a way, that's sort of carrying the team. But now the studio is doing great, and I think this sort of new era of the label, starting with Greyhounds, is really blowing people out of the water. So it's confusing and, I don't know, sometimes complicated, but having all of these things intermeshed, I think, really comes out to everyone's advantage.
So how do you bring that to helping with your own record? Just the knowledge base.
I'd say I try to keep them pretty separate. I'm very familiar with the studio, and have worked on with Adam, the engineer, on a number of projects. So it's easy to turn to Ardent as a studio to work in. Just because I'm familiar with it, I sort of know the guys. It's easy to do. And then, obviously, the personal relationships, having those guys play on the record was huge. But other than that, I try to sort of cut it off at that. I think, honestly, it feeds the other direction better in that anyone I meet or music fans that are attracted to my music, I can very easily sort of pass on to Ardent if they're interested. Or, and being out on the road so much, I get to hear a lot of bands and meet a lot of people in sort of that A&R role all over the country and all over the world, as opposed to just in Memphis on, going out to every open mic.
Well, so, speaking of which, Turchi is getting ready to be all over the place on the road.
Yeah, we don't stop. I don't stop. And we'll be out. This here's just another example of how these paths cross. I'll be out on the road with Greyhounds for their album release tour, opening for them and selling their merch and being their label director. And then I get back from that. The day I get back, Cam and Andrew drive here to Waynesville, North Carolina. We rehearse for a day and then head out on our tour. So it's relentless, but it's a good time. I grew up in Asheville and then moved back to Asheville last July to try to settle down a bit, because for a long time I had no address and was just on the road, but that kind of wore me thin. And then Asheville has changed a lot as a city, and Waynesville seems like a nice nearby alternative. So now I get to hang out here in my apartment in downtown Waynesville, look out over Main Street, and pay about a third of the rent.
No joke.
Life's pretty good. This has been it's quiet, but it's been a good transition.
You kind of skirted the fact that y'all have an enormous tour. This isn't just like hitting the road from Wilmington to Atlanta.
Oh, no. We'll go up, straight up north, sort of from here. We'll cut through Ohio. I had a blast in January. I got to be the artist in residence at this middle school just a middle school and an arts magnet school in Lima, Ohio.
Cool.
Sort of teaching the kids how to play cigar box guitars.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I've never had so much fun. And so we are going to go back up north through Lima to revisit those folks. And then we'll do Chicago, Minneapolis, Bayport, and then back down and through North Carolina. Take a little time out. I think May hopefully will be quieter. And then we're waiting for the final details, but I know we'll be back in Italy and Europe this summer, which is fun. I toured for Italy through 2 weeks in November.
Nice.
And that was incredible, really amazing music community there and sort of blues and roots music appreciators. It's over there on behalf of Mojo Station Blues Society, which is based in Rome, with mainly a guy named Gianluca Diana. He set it all up, and it was great. It was great.
You can find Country Fried Rock on great radio stations like 91.1 The Globe in Goshen, Indiana, Wildman Steve Radio Network from Auburn, Alabama, around the world. Online from Texas at Root Hog Radio, part of Radio Free Americana, from Mobile, Alabama on the Mod Mobilian Radio Network. Listen in Georgetown, California at KFOK 96.9. 96.1. From Kodiak, Alaska on KMXT, KSRQ, Grand Forks, Minnesota, KKRN, Round Mountain, California, KDRP, solar-powered radio from Dripping Springs, Texas, WALW, Moulton, Alabama, and other great stations like CJXF, Calgary, Canada.
You can check out our new record, Can't Bury Your Past, at either our website or devildownrecords.com.
All of y'all in the band come from different places musically as well, and just the fact that you don't live anywhere near one another is just kind of making me go, wow, it works. Like, I can't figure out how you develop songs other than emailing them back and forth to each other.
Well, this sort of goes back to the methodology of why we recorded most of this album, at least did the sort of main tracks to it very sort of casually in this tiny little room without giving ourselves any break or thoughts or anything, is that this sort of whole style of music, which the main influence for the band in terms of my guitar playing originally was from like North Mississippi hill country stuff. Kenny Brown, Arl Burnside, Fred McDowell, more recently Luther Dickinson and the All-Stars. And so for a while the band was just Cam and I, and that music really does best in a very performance-based, live groove sense, not jam band, not with like these extended solos and everything, because there are no chord progressions to go through during the solos, so that's out. That's sort of the vibe and the feeling that seems to carry the sort of emotion and mentality of the music best. So we sort of stuck with that as what tend to result in the best feeling for the songs, as opposed to sort of nailing them. Everyone's familiar with the song. It's not like it's totally made up, but there aren't super strict progressions. The songs aren't extremely tight. And so now at this point, for learning new songs, it really does come down to, I'll sort of work out guitar demos to send to Andrew and Cam, knowing that they can change drastically from that point, but just sort of as a guideline, an idea, as a sketch, and then they listen to them and might fool around with them some. But then it really is the first night we get back together is one of these, is a long show somewhere where it really doesn't matter, like Loggerheads. And so for this April tour, because there's some new sounds on the album that we really want to get down, we actually are going to do the unthinkable and rehearse for a day, which might involve instruments. At this point, it looks like it might involve a lot of beer drinking in Waynesville, but the idea was that it would involve instruments. So in that case, because our first show is in Lima, and we actually have 3 shows that day, one at the middle school, one at the high school in the afternoon, and then one at sort of the one bar in Lima that night. So actually, come to think of it, I'm sure a lot of song learning will go down.
I was not terribly knowledgeable about North Mississippi Hill Country until I talked with Jimbo Mathis a couple years ago.
Oh, yeah, well, that's his territory. I'm more of a visitor to that region, but the really huge difference is the way the rhythms work, very sort of syncopated, very upbeat and sort of driving rhythm as opposed to sitting back. And then just the biggest distinction is that there's no 12-bar progression. Everything stays on the one. Everything has to be a groove or a pattern, or alternate from sort of A riff to B riff, A riff to, which is how, like, Take Me Back Home, the first song off the album, works. There are 3 riffs in that song. The chords never change. The structure just comes from when you change back and forth from the riffs. And so that's sort of the songwriting style that I tend to fall back to, just because that's what I started with learning-wise and what I admired most when I was first working things out.
Well, so Can't Bury Your Past is coming out on April 22nd. Is there a label behind that, or is it your label?
It's my label. That's how it's been for all of them, and I don't know, it tends to work. Recently, Devil Down picked up new distribution through Red Eye Distribution in North Carolina, so that's been great, and those guys helped get the record out to a lot more places, and this is really the first release that will be through them. So, yeah, it should be a little more of an in-store presence. Hopefully that will make a difference. I'm sort of under the impression it will to some extent. The other thing that is worth mentioning, especially if there are people overseas who will be tuning in some way a continuation of some of the ideas off this record. When I was in Italy in November, I got to play with a pretty extraordinary guitar player. His name is Adriano Viterbini, and he's a guitarist and vocalist for BSDE, which is a rock band based out of Rome. Anyway, he's huge, really mind-blowing slide player, and guitarists in a ton of different styles. But he was in Memphis in January, and we got to record a bunch of stuff together that we're working on now. I think it'll be called Scrapyard, and it'll come out sometime in the fall. It's just a 2-guitar duo, and we used, and this was his idea. This wasn't just me spouting out the same mentality, but we sent a bunch of demos back and forth online as soon as I got back from Italy, and then we recorded all of these live tracks one night in Memphis with Adam again, and I think that'll be very cool. It's just the 2 guitars in sort of a very, very loose sort of dialogue and conversation, but it really epitomizes a lot of the same mentality and theory about recording and live sound that Can't Barrier Pass came from. So
that is super cool.
Yeah, he has this solo album that came out last November called Gold Foil, which is mind-blowing. And it was actually not out in the U.S., so I talked to him, and I was able to put that out in the U.S. on Devil Down. So,
neat.
So yeah, it's just kind of pulling all these strings together. A lot of interesting cross-references.
Well, Reed Turchi, this has been a fantastic conversation. Cross-references, I was almost thinking spiderweb of just overlapping of cool folks and music, and this is really fun. I can't wait for people to hear this record.
Yeah, well, I think people will enjoy it. It's, I don't know, whether you're late to the party or have been listening to the older stuff, this is the same kind of slide guitar riffs with heavy drums and really rhythmic bass that we've done before, but now with these whole new elements, some more different guitar work and full saxophone, horn section, and keyboards and organ. It's a whole new sound that I don't know of anyone else trying right now. So.
Nice. Very nice. Well, safe travels to y'all, and good luck with the release. Very excited for you.
All right. Well, thanks for having me.
Thanks. Take care.
All righty.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Country Fried Rock, music uncovered. You can subscribe to our weekly podcast on iTunes. Just search Country Fried Rock. Our Country Fried Rock stinger is from Steve Soto and the Twisted Hearts. Country Fried Rock. Copyright 2013 by Lily Pad Productions. All rights reserved. Country Fried Rock is a partnership with the nonprofit Florence Regional Arts Alliance. Your donations to this program are tax deductible to the extent you are eligible under U.S. law. Country Fried Rock radio programs are distributed to public radio through the Public Radio Exchange, prx.org.
Ever he been helping us some country fried rock.